In our book, They All Saw a Cat, we see the cat through the eyes of a small goldfish. The cat looks big and blurry. How can we get this blurry effect with paint? Let's look to an artist for inspiration. This artist is Travis Bruce Black, and he's a local artist in Albuquerque. Travis makes large-scale watercolor paintings of mostly animals. Let's take a look at his work. Travis Bruce Black is most famous for his bird paintings. He's even had his bird designs printed on fabric to be used in fashion design. But he also paints other animals. The colorful tail of this fox is a great example of how he uses wet-on-wet painting techniques. And we can see those same wet-on-wet painting techniques on the back of this deer. Let's start by finding an animal that lives in water. I'm interested in painting this pufferfish. Looking at my computer screen with a picture of my pufferfish, I'm going to go ahead and sketch a very light sketch of my pufferfish. I'm not going to press down hard on my pencil, and I'm not going to draw too many details. I'm just getting the basic shape of my pufferfish. Here's the sketch of my pufferfish. It's really light, you can barely see it, but I want it to be light because I want the paint to do the job of showing my pufferfish. To begin wet-on-wet painting, I'll need a clean bowl of water and a sponge, and I'm going to wet the areas on my paper inside the area that I want to paint. I want to make sure that I get enough water on the paper so that the surface of the paper looks shiny. While the surface of my fish is still really shiny, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my first color. So I wet my yellow paint and I swirled my brush in the yellow paint, and I started to drop the yellow paint onto the surface of my paper, and I'm going to do the same with the brown paint. The top part of the pufferfish is pretty yellow, so that's where I added the yellow paint. The bottom part gets a little bit white. I'm adding these brown spots on top just to add some interesting texture like I see on my pufferfish. It doesn't have to look exactly like the picture that you're looking at, so I'm not exactly making an exact copy of the pufferfish, but I am using the colors for inspiration for what I put down on the surface. And all the paint that is getting onto the surface of my paper that is wet is going to kind of spread out and bleed out from the center. And that's what I want. That's the fun thing about this technique. You can't really control it once the paint is on the surface, but that's the fun of it. I'm going to let my paper dry completely before I start the next step. Now that the pufferfish part of my paper is completely dry, I'm going to go around the background with a sponge, and I'm going to add water to this surface. And again, I want to make sure that the surface of the paper gets plenty of water so that it's shiny before I start adding my paint. And I'm just working around my pufferfish. I don't want this color to get on top of the pufferfish. Now I'm going to start adding the background colors for my pufferfish. So I'm going to go in with some blue, and again, as I drip the blue paint onto the paper, it's going to start spreading out and kind of just doing its own thing, flowing on the surface of the paper. I like this technique, this wet-on-wet technique, for making sea animals because it mimics what the water does in the ocean. So now I'm going to add some purple. Blue and purple are similar colors, and so they blend nicely together. Now I'm going to add some green towards the bottom, maybe to kind of mimic the seaweed. And again, green is close to blue, so it's going to blend into those colors. Because I let my paper dry before adding the background colors, and I only wet the background, you'll see how the water kind of flows around the fish. We want that to happen. Right now I want to take the time to paint in some of the details of my pufferfish. So since the background is the wet part and the puffer fish is dry from last week, I'm going to go ahead and use these colors in my color palette to paint some more details. I want to define the eyes better and the fins better. I want to add more of those spikes that are on the puffer fish, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now, just tapping gently on the surface of my puffer fish to create those little spikes on his body. Now my painting is done. I enjoy looking at the accidental effects that the watercolor made on my paper by using the wet on wet technique.